Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
And we're back with another episode. But we have got three of us, but we haven't got the loud, annoying one. So
we've traded him in.
Yeah, well, he's a bit busy at the moment anyway, isn't he?
He's really busy. I actually called him. This is Richard Negus we're talking about. I called him yesterday.
Can't work it out.
Yeah, just in case. And he said, I can't be long, chum. He always calls me chum, weird. It can't be long, chum. I'm actually just waiting on a call from my agent. And I just said to him, do you hear yourself? Do you hear what you're saying? I said, I miss the old hedge layer Negus, not the celebrity hedge layer Negus. You're a change man. You're a change man. I don't like it.
You can tell it's after hedge season because when you ring him, he's on the phone for an hour as well. If he does speak to you and he's not got his call from the celebrity afterwards, he's just on the phone for an hour. Whereas when you ring him from September through to the end of March, he'll go, yeah, what is it? Yeah, fine, do it. Right, I've got to go. And that's it. And that's all you'll hear.
Or he'd give you half hour while you hear Richard Gould huffing and puffing with a chainsaw in the background, carrying him through the hedge lane season.
Anyway, we're being rude. Should we talk to our guest?
I guess we should.
Who's that? Who's that over there?
Patrick Galbraith. What do? I do columns. I do all kinds of things. I write about food. I write about deer. I've just written a book that is proving to be more controversial than I anticipated. I knew it was going to be fun. It's transpired to be even more enjoyable than I thought it would be.
Yeah, you wrote one of my favourite things ever, which was a very simple piece about trying to get a pond made. Just the dramas of trying to dig your own pond because you want your own flight pond.
Was that when I was quite young?
I think it was, yeah. It was a very simple piece, but it really resonated with me. I don't know why.
Yeah, I do a lot of simple pieces, and I often forget the pieces that I've written. Country Life magazine said they had a complaint from somebody yesterday who was mentioned in my book, and they said the detail with which they knew my sort of back catalogue in the magazine of writing was really amazing. And I said, well, that's fascinating because I sort of finish a piece and then it's done.
Yeah, you never go back and look at your own stuff. We never listen to these. I've no idea what I've said afterwards in the podcast. This is somebody that I've met you 2 or 3 times. It's only been sort of in very brief, outside a talk or a tent or something, going, oh, I like what you did there. Oh, that's great. Okay, and we moved on. But I think, Callum, how long have you known Patrick now?
We've done shoots several times in various different places across the length and breadth of the UK, I suppose.
Shoots with cameras, shoots with guns. What are we talking about here?
A bit of both, but I had the thought this morning, I don't think there's many people that have spent such a long time in their company and never really spoken to that much. We're either I mean, I think we had a good chat on a way out with Mike Swan on the Medway, where we were in the boat, and then after that we were hunkered down in a wildfowling, so we were dead quiet,
right, yeah,
waiting.
God, did he forget the keys for the lock or something? Is that right?
Oh, yeah, we went out and then we had to come back. I think we went out twice. I've been out a few times with Mike on the
Mike Swan, old Mad Mike. He's always kind of laughing, grabbing his balls. I
love Mike.
Mike Swan came to my house on Christmas Eve and we just hung out for, hours and hours. He was telling my family all about bumblebees, and my family were like, who the fuck is this guy? And it was, wild.
Mike refers to his dog as Good Bitch. And I have a video of him, and I had to cut all the sound out, or he says "good bitch, good bitch, good bitch" over and over again because it really didn't fit the tempo. It just seemed so odd. Bramble, that dog is great.
Very, very clever guy. Very interesting. He's one of those people who, you know, the thing I find so endearing about Mike Swan, and for those of you who don't know him who are listening, he's a stalwart at the GWCT, and he often says things to me like, well, if we just make the case for shooting as part of conservation and so on, I think people will get it. And I go away and I think, I wish that was so. I wish sensible people with qualifications and with the expertise that Mike has could just say sensible things, and people would go, yeah, well, that sounds sensible. Then he doesn't engage at all in the kind of culture wars stuff. It's not really a world I think that he kind of recognizes. He just talks sense and he really cares.
I think it's a bit of a danger if you only ever speak to other sensible people who all agree to argue on first principles. Then you sort of think the world works like that if you can just get to people.
Exactly, and then the other thing you can do is you can spend your whole time on social media and you go, oh my god, everyone is a complete nut job, and actually probably the truth is like somewhere between the two of those, right?
It is.
You'd like to think so.
Well, exactly, yeah. It's the 90-10 split, I think, probably.
But when you venture out into the world, you do wonder sometimes. Is that
how do people get dressed in the morning?
Yeah, well, sometimes they're not. I mean, our local supermarket has had to put a sign up saying, please wear clothes when you come in. Sort of a cardigan or there's actually a dressing gown doesn't really count anymore.
You wonder what went wrong there. Which particular incident inspired that sign?
It was the onesie. So,
did you see the guy I posted on X that thought that was very disappointed that Hadrian's Wall wasn't on par with the Great Wall of China. And he said that no one seemed to care, and at one point he saw a sheep just simply hop over it. And that was
that's valid,
unacceptable.
Is the Great Wall of China, I mean, look, I've never been to China. I don't know if either of you have, but is the Great Wall of China an amazing feature along the whole length of it, or what's the deal with the Great Wall of China?
I think it's great.
Well, you'd be disappointed if it wasn't. You want your money back.
Yeah, it's a bit like Hadrian's Wall. It's got some really good bits, and then it's got some bits where it's just not there at all. And then it sort of peters out into the desert at one end and the sea at the other. It's sort of.
Have you been?
I've done bits in the middle of the Great Wall of China. I used to work for a company that did, those horrible corporate charity things where somebody's going to go and climb Kilimanjaro or do Everest Base Camp, and they come around the office trying to get sponsored to pay for their holiday.
Right, yeah.
I was on the other end of that, where you'd take them out up and do Kilimanjaro or Everest Base Camp, and we did Great Wall of China one year, and it was weird because you stayed in the same hotel for 10 days, and every day you just got the coach back and forth out to wherever you finished the walk the day before. And you just have to take a slightly longer coach journey every day to get to the end. And you were staying in the same hotel. So the sense of travel was completely overshadowed by the fact you're just in the same manky hotel room.
Wow.
I always think I would be deeply ashamed to be one of those people who goes around an office and asks for people to give you a quid for whatever. But almost every day I go around the office and ask people if they want to go for lunch with me, and it's usually a no as well. And actually, thinking about it, that's kind of just as shameful, really. So,
Are you trying to get them to pay for lunch as well?
Well, no, I'd happily pay for them to have lunch, but actually, even that doesn't get them to come out. So so it goes.
So you've written a book. Is this your second?
I've written 2 books.
Yeah.
Not all ChatGPT. Some of it I even myself have did little bits.
In the style
That's not true, by the way. That's not true. If my editor's listening, my apologies. That's not true. That's not true.
I think soon it's all going to be ChatGPT anyway, isn't it?
It's a really interesting point. I mean, I read the audiobook for my book, which, if anybody listening likes audiobooks, get onto Audible. But I think quite soon AI will be able to read audiobooks, which is amazing. You just give a sample of your voice and then it will do it. And for all of those kind of slightly fourth-rate, out-of-work actors who put bread on their table by reading audiobooks, it's quite frightening.
Yeah, for sure.
I just finished listening to your audiobook, and in the very first section, I've got something to bring up with you that you said Rowan rather than Rowantree.
Yeah, that's probably, my strong Scottish accent. I think that's probably where that comes from.
Yeah, I think
They
probably
would say
is.
around. They would say a round tree.
Tree. Yeah, it just took me out of it completely. I just had to get through the next 10 hours with that rattling
Like
along.
this fucker. No, that's interesting, isn't it? That probably is a sort of. I grew up in Scotland. I don't have a particularly Scottish accent, but it probably is a round tree. They would say, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's only the Welsh that call it rowan anyway, because
Do they?
Yeah,
In Wales, do they think that rowan trees keep witches away?
it's witches, but it's also strongly related to churchyards and holy sites and religious sites there.
Right.
So it's part of the. I don't think it's a national tree, but it's like part of it. It's like the next one down from oak in terms of the Welsh
Oh,
hierarchy.
really?
People are going to write in and tell me I'm wrong. So let's get them to direct their ire at you instead, Patrick. What's this second book? What's it called and what's it about?
So the book is called Uncommon Ground: Rethinking Our Relationship with the Countryside. And the title that I was originally going to go with was Their Country, the Places That Divide Us. And I have to say, I think that working title gets to the heart of what the book is about. It's about who gets to access the countryside, what they can do there, how connected we feel to the countryside, and the way that the countryside inspires senses of identity. I mean, let me just tell you a little story about the preface. So I went to go and see these two brothers in Hull who spent their working life in the shipyard there, and they have spent all the spare time they've got during the season out wildfowling, out shooting pink-footed geese, and the guy who founded their wildfowling club, a guy called Stanley Duncan, who effectively founded Basque, actually, they go to his grave when the pink-footed geese return in the autumn with feathers that are there on the marsh when the geese return, and they leave them at the side of the grave. And I realized when I was there that for them, the geese, they're not just like a quarry or something to eat or something to shoot at. They're almost like a kind of deity. Their sport, they would call it that, is a kind of goose worship, and it's how they connect to this place. And obviously places very far away in terms of the birds' migration. And that kind of, I think, gets to the heart of the book. But I mean, you've read it, so I don't know. You can tell me what it's about.
Well, I don't know whether I've got the right take on this, but it seems like you sort of did a Louis Theroux on the Right to Roam campaign.
In part.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not. It's been kind of. Right to Roam have definitely felt that lots of it is about them, and I would say they're there in part, and they're a kind of jumping off point in a way. But yeah, no, certainly I got down and dirty with Right to Roam.
One of the things you sort of repeat, well, not repeat, but you come back towards a way. Yeah, well, I'm trying to get my words right because you're an actual writer and I'm somebody who struggles with the English language. You say that it's the loudest voices are the ones that we listen to most within that world, and it does seem that Right to Roam have been very good at making themselves that loudest voice, or the voice that's listened to the most.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I mean, the thing I would pick up on there, I had a really interesting time on Radio 4 a couple of days ago now with a guy called Robert McFarlane, who lots of listeners will have heard of. He's one of the great nature writers of our time. And we were. What I wanted to say to him is we were talking about rights. He was talking about the rights of rivers, and the rights of forests came up and so on. And I was talking about the right of people to be listened to. So I think we've heard an awful lot from Right to Roam campaigners. A lot of them have tremendous connections. They write for publications like the New Statesman, like the Guardian. They're not factory hands who are kind of oppressed. I don't believe. And what I wanted to go and do was to talk to people in the countryside, those who work and live in the countryside, about their perception. So I went down to Dartmoor and I spoke to a young guy, a farmer's son, and I said to him, "What do you think of Right to Roam?" Very shy young guy, and he almost couldn't look at me, but he said, "I think they're just a bunch of rich Londoners trying to tell us what to do." Now, I'm not saying that that's absolutely correct. I'm not saying it's correct in every instance. I mean, Right to Roam is a mass movement. There are lots of them. They're not all rich Londoners. But it's fascinating why he said that. Why does he think that? And the other moment that is sort of related to that is we were there on Dartmoor and Guy Shrubsole was addressing the crowd. and there was a farmer who was just trying to get through, just a farmer smoking a rolled up cigarette, and it was the most terrific image. And his wife, I assume, was quite agitated, and people were being slightly unpleasant to her in quite a superior way. And I just thought, this is fascinating, because you've got people who are kind of purporting to be peasants. I mean, that's a word that Guy Shrubsole uses again and again, we're the peasants. And actually, you've got some, probably tenant farmer just trying to make, enough money to kind of feed his family, who can't get through to do his job because all of these, sort of Oxbridge grads are here. And that's a really fascinating dynamic. And it's been a dynamic that they have absolutely hated in terms of the way that the book has come together.
But those tenant farmers are probably the people that they're taking it out on them, but they're not really the ones that are. They're just kind of against them in a way, but they're the people that are on the estate enforcing potential cut-off zones, right, to where people can't go. So it's not necessarily they're against the tenant farmer, but what they stand for and the sort of the organisation they're in. Is that not?
Well, I think the point is that they're not against the tenant farmer. They don't see the tenant farmer. So when they look at a piece of land, they see somebody in a big house who they've got to scrap with. They don't see the person who actually works on the land, and there is a thing, and I write about this. I mean, landowners get a lot of, as Mark Avery, the campaigner and conservationist, put it in his review, a lot of brickbats. There are landowners in this country, they don't even know what they own. To them, it's just a way to sort of store wealth in quite a tax efficient way still.
Yeah.
I've walked with landowners along fields, and they've said to me, do I own that bit next door? Because I stalked there or whatever. Saying, I don't know, mate, it's your land. But there are people on the land eking out, a really, really meager existence. And those are the people who land access campaigners don't see. And I think that's a fascinating thing, right? The kind of rural working class are not seen. And when they're imagined, they're just seen as kind of lackeys in a feudal way. So it's so interesting. So wrong on so many counts.
So you open the book with the kinder trespass, sort of not a recreation, but the meeting in Hayfield and the discussion there about, was it Benny Rothman?
Benny Rothman, yeah.
Who was the almost sort of held up as this deified figure of access, and this is
and I mean, I suspect, and I think he's a fascinating guy, a very important part of working class history. Was he a member of the Young Communist Party? I think he was. Yeah.
And can you sort of lay out for the audience, because I'm very conscious that it's that difficult thing, because I know this subject quite well, and I'm trying not to just say,
not to jump in and people are like, what the hell are you talking about? Well, everybody will know. I'm a rambler from Manchester, where, and if they don't, they should. So Ewan McColl was the, I'm going to use the wrong title, but it was something like the head of propaganda, right? And he wrote that song. He was considered to be a particularly dangerous person, but they went out there. That land was a grouse shooting estate, right? And they went up into the hills and they fought it out with the gamekeepers there. There's a guy called Wolfie, really interesting guy. Lots of them went off to fight in the Spanish Civil War. So when I was there in Hayfield, there were people dressed up as though they were going to fight in the Spanish Civil War. And they're quite kind of comic figures, some of these people, in a way. It's kind of, they get very upset, but it is cosplay to a degree. And, it's kind of terrific. It's a wonderful part of British heritage. But, I mean, one of the things that I think is interesting to dwell on is that, like, if you grew up around Kinderscout, then you couldn't go up into the hills, right? If you grew up around Winter Hill, you couldn't really go up into the hills either. And these people really wanted to be able to do that, and their lives were hard. Their lives were miserable. And there's a kind of one reader pointed something out to me the other day, which I thought was fascinating. Who'd really liked the book. He said that the land access movement now goes to places. They almost go on like trespass day trips, right? So like, let's go to the Englefield estate, like, let's go to the Arundel estate, like, let's go and stick it to Alexander Darwall kind of thing. Whereas somebody like Benny Rothman, he was going to go up there, he'd be there the next weekend, the next weekend, the next weekend, the next weekend. So it's interesting, this kind of idea that there's like this lineage, and exploring that lineage is quite an interesing thing culturally.
So a lot of these people, these trespass day trips, is it like a tug of war against the establishment that, like, we we think it's not necessarily that they want to go up on the hill that someone's telling them they can't. It's that they're just trying to exercise the right to prove the point. Or have I?
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I almost think it's just best as a like journalist and writer to take it from them, right? So I spoke to a person who was very active in Right to Roam, and she said to me, so let me tell you the way that this happened. I don't know how well you guys remember this, but Guy Shrubsole, co-founder of the Right to Roam campaign, went to the Arundel estate and let a corvid out of a trap, right? That's confirmed. We know that, okay? And he said, I will always take the opportunity to do so. He was on the Arundel estate. He thought he wasn't. He ended up having an argument with the gamekeeper online, who's a terrific guy, and it ran and ran. And it was sort of quite embarrassing in a way because he'd been somewhere and he thought he was somewhere else, it seemed. And anyway, and not long after that, the Right to Roam campaign went there to trespass. And I was talking to a girl who said, oh, you must come on my trespass. And I'd been down there to see this gamekeeper not long before this. She said, you must come on my trespass to Arundel. And I said, I don't know whether Arundel's the one. And I showed her all of these videos of kind of conservation efforts at Arundel. I was showing her curlew chicks. I was showing her whatever. And she looked at them and then said, oh, yeah, but we're not going there. We're going somewhere else on the estate. And I said, you don't know the estate. This is like whatever. And she asked me to come along. I couldn't make it. I had something else that I had to go to for writing this book. And I bumped into her again, like not long after that. And I said, how was Arundel? Like, was it, and she seemed to think it was pretty amazing. I mean, no one cared that they were there. There was a lot of wildlife. And she said to me, and this is verbatim, and they hate this, that Right to Roam is a symbolic thing. She'd gone there expecting, no doubt, that they were going to have a kind of Benny Rothman-like experience, and it wasn't that at all. And that, to me, is like, so I'm not telling you what you are telling me what you are, and it is a symbolic thing, and what is it symbolizing? That's what's so fascinating.
So is it almost that they are creating a tribal group under this identity? That
100%.
They have to do it as a performative thing in order to maintain that identity?
No, completely. And it's I find it so extraordinary. I'm fascinated by it. I have to say, I'm truly fascinated by it. I mean, one of the things that Right to Roam fell out with each other on when I was kind of writing about them was Palestine. So some members of Right to Roam wanted Right to Roam to take a position on Palestine. The kind of head campaigners were like, we're not taking a position on Palestine. I'm thinking, lads, like, you're campaigning for access to more farmland in Britain. I mean, Palestine is tremendously important, but not only do I think that most of you probably don't know enough about it to really speak about it, because it looks like you don't know that much about sort of conservation and farming either. No. But like, what has that got to do with? And it just it was really interesting. And I think symbolic, the word that girl used, is absolutely right. And this whole thing of like, we're the peasants. I mean, there are people in the world who live in very hard conditions, agricultural labourers and so on. There have been peasants in Britain, but it's a little distasteful for very successful authors, Guardian columnists and so on, to purport to be, this sort of peasantry, I think.
There's a line in the book that says, is basically trying to stick it to the man, where somebody says to you that this person had made their money from pheasant shooting. And anyone that's got actual knowledge of the countryside knows that that's not really a thing. Yeah.
All these gamekeepers reading my book being like, shit, how do you do that?
Do they run a class? Yeah.
If I go to, can I pay for the Guy Shrubsole course on the
Guy Shrubsole guide to making millions out of pheasants? That's a really good idea, actually. I mean, we're published by the same publisher. I'll text after this and say, you should do this.
Can you do grouse after that as well?
Well, we'll make it. It'll be a CountrySlide production, and we'll retire on it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But it just shows that a fundamental lack of knowledge on behalf of these people, and you kind of, I don't want to say like it's like a big gotcha in the book, but you've got these moments that show huge cracks in the logic and the thinking throughout the spending time with these people.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and it's so there's two things there. I think it's really interesting to kind of when you're trying to understand something, you don't just go and if you want to understand the Republican Party, you don't just go and talk to JD Vance. You don't do whatever. You come in at an oblique angle. You talk to people in rural places, at rallies, and so on, whatever. But I mean, the stuff that I was hearing was just remarkable. So like driven grouse shooting on Dartmoor. I mean, that'll be news to anybody who sort of really actually works on Dartmoor. And Alexander Darwell, fascinating guy, because I write this line that on Dartmoor that day he was kind of everywhere and nowhere, and he was whatever you wanted him to be. He'd made millions doing this. He was actually really interested apparently in the mineral rights. I mean, he'd made a lot of money from pheasant shooting. He'd bought all the land. He'd inherited all the land. He was this kind of like Gatsby figure. You could say anything about him and people would go, that's absolutely right, spot on. And then I met the bloke and I was just like,
very underwhelmed.
yeah, well, I mean, I'm gonna say it. And there will be people who listen to this. My ops. He's a pretty ordinary bloke with an interest in conservation. He's pretty conservative. He's clearly very good at what he does. But yeah, he literally he like the extent to which he's a bogeyman. I mean, there were people there with pictures of him, with signs. Going onto somebody's land with pictures of them and with signs. I don't know. It's. I mean, so this whole thing about this campaign, they say they're about wonder and goodness. It doesn't feel that kind of gooey and wonderful to me doing that, but I don't know.
Yeah, that does sound a bit. Is he not like? Is he just like the figurehead for the man?
Oh no, 100%. I mean, they call him Comrade Darwell, and they kind of use him as this. Did he get the PR right? I don't think he believes in PR. I think he has a very specific way of thinking, quite a binary way of thinking. He doesn't do PR in the way that other estates do. So I mean, let's name some names, right? The Holcomb estate, terrific on PR. I think Arundel are quite good. I actually think, funnily enough, that Darwell has been quite good for Right to Roam. I think Right to Roam have been quite good for Arundel because they're letting the bird out the trap is just moronic.
And the whole Dartmoor wild camping thing was such a poor faith argument as well, because it was always made that now wild camping is banned, that's the last place you can wild camp. It's well, no, it's just if you overturn the wild camping permission or that interpretation of the law, that you just return it to the same as the rest of the upland areas of England and Wales where wild camping is generally tolerated. There have not been any prosecutions for it, and it's actually embedded into most of the outdoor education syllabus. To do my Mountain Leader Award, I had to do a certain number of wild camps in England and Wales at altitude, and it was the only way to achieve that qualification. So it's.
But surely that's impossible, though, Richard, right? Because you can only do it on.
And that was back in the early and mid 2000s, a long time ago. And it's that strange thing that I feel like we got this settled after the 2004 Land Reform Act, and we'd already had the 2000 Countryside Right of Way Act then. When I started working in the outdoors in the early 2000s, or mid 2000s, and then got qualified and started running my own stuff, there was this general vibe of, we have it great. We've got all this access to the land, to the mountains that wasn't there before, and that there was sort of, you felt you were on the winning side then. And then that narrative changed back around to you can't do anything anywhere. And I'm not sure when
this happened to me, right? And it's really amusing. There's a guy called John Moses who wrote that he feigned mock surprise, which doesn't really work as a sort of sentence anyway, because quite how you would feign mock surprise, I was thinking, Jesus, whatever. But I went down to Richard Benyon's estate, Englefield, right? And I read the start of the book Wild Service, and I read it in good faith. It said that, except, and I'm going to get this slightly wrong, but I'll do my best, other than basically a few stunted footpaths, his vast dominion remains closed at all times. Okay. I got public transport down there because my car was broken, and for the book, and basically the point that I went down there to prove is that access is quite shit, right? I hadn't done my research on this at this point. I read the book, right? This is the book, published by Bloomsbury, biggest independent publisher. Great, Got there, hang on a second, the gate's open. Right, okay. So I go in, meet a guy from Ghana. I'm like, what are you doing here, mate? And all he wanted to talk about was how brilliant the access is and how happy he is that you can go to places like this, because he said in Ghana you would have nothing like this, All right, well, okay, that's a bit weird. Met someone from America a bit further down the drive, and they just said, this is incredible. They're like, you cannot do this in America. Okay, then I got the garden center, then I'm meeting this, that, and the next person. There's all of these meadows. I find a thing about like 1,700 acres of access. There's a community woodland. And, I would like to say the access is not signposted that well, in part because the estate is so big that quite a lot of it is in another place. But it was just, to use a technical term, fucking bullshit. There are 1,700 acres that you can access. Richard Benyon, who owns it, wants access to be better. He wants to communicate with the local community about how access can be better. They've gone mental, saying, there was not actually this and that. The next thing, no, fellas, you've had to change your book. You have had to change your book. I wrote to Bloomsbury, I said, this is incorrect. And I believe that there might still be errors in there. But, what's the point in just bullshitting about this? Like, let's accept what we've got. It's not great everywhere. It could be better. How could it be better? But let's not just pretend that we're locked out of the countryside because it is not true. I don't see what the benefit is in that, unless you're it's this kind of cosplay thing that I don't really get.
You must have encountered some places where you thought, well, surely, they could open this up and it could be. Was there any points where you thought, actually, fair enough, they might be right in any way?
100%. And this is my thing kind of always, it's like, when I meet a farmer or a landowner who says, the public don't understand the countryside, it's like, but what have you done to try to change that? And that's not just about throwing open access. So, how many estates have lakes with pike in them? How many of them write to the local primary school and say, can we do like a pike fishing workshop or whatever? And the whole thing of, we've not got time. Well, make time. Make time. Like, you have to connect people with the land. You have to give them a respect for the land. And I genuinely believe this is true. I think if landowners and farmers and conservationists as well got on the front foot and tried to engage local communities and provide engagement opportunities, I think Right to Roam would have done the thing and everyone would have gone, that's bollocks. But it's almost like flourished because of a lack of engagement and because of a lack of knowledge about how good access actually is. But how you change culture is through engagement.
And they have quite a good PR campaign with the numbers, because they say, was it 8% of England is open access land?
Everything else is off limits. Yeah. So obviously before the Crow Act, you couldn't go anywhere.
And they never mention Wales, which is 20%.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, all the footpaths. I mean, they say that if you put all the footpaths round and round and round and round and round in England, you could go around the globe 6 times.
Yeah. Well, September, I'm walking from Ivybridge in Dartmoor to Oxford on public footpaths.
Well, impossible though, because the countryside is off limits.
Well, the only dodgy bit is Salisbury Plain. I think I might get shot.
Makes no sense.
But yeah.
And the question I would say to you is like, okay, so you're walking on footpaths there. When you look out across fields of wheat, are you like, these bastards, I want to be able to walk through that wheat? Or are you like, no, I can see it and I can, because that's the thing that always interests me. I mean,
Is it that people look at those landscapes and they think, well, that's currently not doing something? Well, there's Lewis Winks a couple of years ago got into an argument on Twitter before he left the Blue Sky saying, well, there's all these field margins. Why can't we just walk on the field margins?
Indeed, yeah. You're not allowed to talk about that, though, because I've got in a lot of trouble for talking about that.
Yeah, well, I've got screenshots. As I wrote it I put it into an article. But
that is, expect a knock on the door in the night.
Have to find me. And is that the thing though? Is it that we aren't good at connecting people with the landscapes because we don't say that thing that looks like it's just being a nice place and a nice view over there is actually hopefully a factory that turns out great partridge or woodcock or curlew.
Exactly. And you've got 2 things there, right? You've got a field, okay? The bit in the middle of that is generally growing food for us or growing food for things that we might eat. And that little tiny sliver that we leave at the side, right? It's the little tiny sliver we leave at the side, that's the wildlife. The wildlife that still remains, that's still hanging on. So the idea that like we should just be able to use it as a footpath is like, because we want the middle of the field for food production and we want the edge of the field for recreation. And it's like, it's so anthropocentric.
I don't think being formally a regular person, I don't think...
Before you got indoctrinated by us.
Yeah. Being formally a regular person, I don't think people understand that even the extent that just walking through a piece of wood affects the wildlife in the wood or through a field margin, the damage it does and the disturbance it has for wildlife. Even now, if I'm like deer stalking and something happens and there's like, some kids riding their bike on the edge of the
Yeah,
wood,
yeah, it's over. Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
I would never expect that something so minor, like Forestry Commission starting a chainsaw like a mile away, has scared the entirety of a wood. Like how is that? I would never have expected that. So I think
just on a practical level with deer stalking, I mean, I do a lot of deer stalking. I'll be going down a woodland ride occasionally, shoot a muntjac. We've all done it. We all miss deer. What do you do if someone's coming around the corner with a dog? Like it's a very practical. It's not like a whataboutery thing. Like it is exceptionally dangerous. Not only are there not going to be. I remember saying to a keeper a while ago, right? Where I was stalking the edge of a village, and he said to me, but don't worry too much about people, because if there are people anywhere, there won't be any deer, right? And that is an because they're scared, because we're predators, because they look at us and they think, so this whole notion that, we're part of nature. You don't walk through a meadow and a lapwing goes, fantastic, pal, great to see you, see you again tomorrow. No, they see you and they go, fuck, this fucker's going to try and kill me, right? And try and eat me, because, it's what they've been doing for time immemorial. It's crazy. It's crazy.
It's like that thing of invisible impact, that people don't realise the impact they're having, and nobody thinks they're the villain in their own story. They always think they're the hero, so they don't consider naturally that, I wonder if my actions are having a negative consequence.
Yeah.
It's like the meme, it's like the Skinner meme, is it? I wonder if it's me causing a problem for wildlife. No, it's the landowning bastards that are to blame.
And you're like, no, I'm actually monitoring. I'm actually looking at the wildlife. It does. Yeah, I mean, you have all these. I was talking to Tom Cameron, who's was it Tom Cameron? Yeah, he's a great ecologist at Essex, and he was saying, like, everywhere you go on the beach, just imagine the wildlife that would be there if it wasn't for all the people. And that's just, and we're so weird as a species. Like, it's almost a colonial thing. Like, we see somewhere and we're like, we should go there. Whereas, you see other species, and other species will look at places and go, that's not really for me, and that's not really where I live. Like, I just stay here, or stay in the marsh, or stay up the tree, or whatever. They're not like, I want it all. I want it all.
So what do you think the biggest myth then the public holds about sort of either the land access or the way land's managed in the UK? What's the average across?
The thing is, there's not like there's not one thing. It's more sort of, I mean, one of the most interesting things is, and this is now moving on to a historical point, but the idea that everybody used to own the ground that they worked. So a kind of misrepresentation of the commons and enclosure. I mean, people were treated very badly. We know that. But, I spent quite a lot of time talking to historians, I mean, proper historians on this, who would say that, the notion of the commons as an egalitarian space, a sort of egalitarian free-for-all, is not right. So there were court cases to do with people trespassing on the commons. Now, the way that we understand the commons today would mean that trespassing on the commons wasn't possible, surely, because it was like a place where everyone did Morris dancing and like held hands and whatever, danced around maypoles. That is not what the commons was. And so I think the language used is really interesting, and the extent to which things are. But I mean, that's a very old thing. Is that after the Civil War, you had quite a lot of movements who would say, we need to go back to, Anglo-Saxon England, when everything was wonderful. And I was talking to historians, and I hope I'm not going to garble this point, but you had a lot of slaves in Anglo-Saxon England. The idea that everyone had their own little bit and it was like Woodstock, that's not, but it can kind of be whatever you want it to be because it was so long ago. So that, I think, is, and then also, I mean, this is a more kind of a subtle point, but I think that lots of people think that landowners, big landowners, sort of wake up in the morning and worry about people trespassing across their boundary, and as I say, I think a lot of landowners don't really know what they own, and that's actually a darker thing, right? That's a darker thing. The idea of land as just being a kind of store of wealth, a kind of tax-efficient store of wealth.
I've got a friend who's got this theory that Tolkien is to blame for some of this, because you've got this sort of this vision of being able to walk entirely across Middle Earth and go off on your adventure and just set out from the door with your
hairy feet,
your bindle, and just walk in a direction to a location, and it didn't really matter where you went to. That's what life was like up until about 1750.
Yeah. No, I think that's probably very true. No, you're probably true. Yeah, that's right. And I think though, I had a very interesting conversation with a guy who's very into pilgrimage, and he said that the Right to Roam campaign were keen to do some kind of collab. And he's like, listen, guys, like, I'm up for it, but I can't tell you that anybody is trying to go on pilgrimage in this country and they can't actually get to where it is they're trying to go to. Now, I'm sure you're going to have all kinds of people who pick up on this and say, oh, well, you can't go here and you can't go there. But again, I'm just reporting what he was saying. And that's really interesting. It's as you say, that space between myth and reality. And it's that thing of like, if you can control historical narratives, you've got quite a good chance of controlling kind of where we're heading. And that's what really this is all about. It's all about actually, it's all about a fight for the past as much as it's about the future.
There's something, and Callum and I were talking about this the other day, that because we're on different sides of the country, the view outside of his window and the sort of the 5 miles around his house looks very different to the 5 miles around my house, because you've got that potentially very urban-led campaign for Right to Roam and for that increased access. Very London-centric, or coming out of those urban areas, that perception is skewed because generally the access to the countryside is maybe a little bit poorer in the urban edges because the urban edges keep moving out into the countryside. Whereas
that's so interesting. Yeah.
we are here. I mean, I can't see a street light from here, and I can just look at a range of hills. It's all open access, and I can take any number of footpaths to get there. But that's because I chose to live here. I didn't choose to live where Callum lives, and there's nothing wrong with your house, Callum. I'm sure it's fine. But it's sort of disproportionate access is something that keeps being brought up, but they never argue that the people of Birmingham or Leicester don't have walking distance to a nice beach.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. I mean, when I've felt access keenly, or rather a lack of access, I should say, is for Country Life magazine a while ago, I recreated that journey in 3 Men in a Boat, if you know the Jerome K. Jerome books, a very famous book. And everywhere we went, like, there would be signs like, no camping here, no camping here. I mean, these were people's gardens, but I was like, this is pretty shit. These people in these massive houses. And then I think actually in the original, that's also the same thing that they come up against. And I could totally imagine if you lived in like Walton-on-Thames or something, you would be like, the access is terrible. But it's like, but that's because, we're in an almost suburban zone. And I had a very interesting conversation in the book with a hunt master, home counties hunt master. And he was saying that the big problem that they have is rich Londoners buying 100 acres and just saying you can't hunt across here anymore and closing down their country. And as I was saying on the radio the other day, that's like what I hear from the Right to Roam guys as well. So you have these kind of, dual things going on, that Right to Roam think that like they're anti-hunting and hunting is sort of anti what they're doing, but actually they both got a kind of common enemy, although they would never see it like that, I don't think.
So
I had a look at bridle paths once to see where we could go with the horses, and the logistics of it were just terrible. Like you'd get one bridle path that you could go for like, a quarter of a mile, and then it would end. There was no way to get to another part unless you had a horse box and put it on. So it became like these areas of permission that were fundamentally useless because who wants to go on a quarter-mile hack?
Is it because the bits that used to be bridle paths are now tarmacked and they're just called the B5439?
Yeah, so there was an access to it, and then there's like a footpath down that's obviously public are walking across on the footpath, and then there's a bit more bridle path, but unfortunately you can't take.
I think that's a really valid
horses
point,
along a river with people walking dogs.
I spoke to a guy the other day whose thing is about trying to like connect paths up and things, and that's really quite interesting, and it's about like the other thing is I spoke to a farmer actually not far from here, chicken farmer, and he was saying he's got a right of way that goes through his yard or up to his yard. He said, now this right of way used to be for people to come to the farm who were working here. He now has a problem with it because of avian influenza. He doesn't really want people walking up it, along it, through it. And his point is that like maybe we should rethink paths and create paths that work for us now, rather than being like, oh, we need to maintain everything and so on. I think that's a really interesting point, is what works for us now.
Well, a lot of the tracks around here are sort of old postman paths.
Yes,
linking up farms that way. But the north of the border, up in that there Scotland. That's sort of often painted as this utopia where there is absolutely no problems with access whatsoever. No one has ever had a problem at all, particularly in the Central Belt.
Yeah.
How did that sort of come across in your conversations?
Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting. So I was watching a video, and there's all that. Yeah, it's like it's almost like land access bingo. They've got the 8% thing in there. They've got the peasants in there. The pheasants get mentioned in there, and then there's this guy who's just like chewing a piece of grass. He's like, "Yeah, well, it works pretty well in Scotland, doesn't it?" And it's like it's like he doesn't seem to know. And I thought, well, I'll get on the road. I've only spent whatever like most of my life there. I got on the road, I'll get up and see how it's going. Pouring rain, driving alongside Loch Lomond, and these two hitchhikers were there. And I couldn't see them until last minute. I reversed back, it was raining so much. I got in the car. And I was like, oh, how have you been getting on? They're both from England. They were like, it's rubbish. We thought like Scotland was just like this promised land in terms of you could go wherever you want. But like all the way up Loch Lomond, there's just these no camping signs. I was like, oh, that's really unfortunate. They're like, yeah, but we did find a boat that we just like took out onto the loch and just like took it for a spin. And this guy was like, yeah, I don't really think it belonged to anyone. And this girl he was with was like, I think it actually might have done. It could have been like someone's. She was like, I was really shitting myself that we were going to get back and there was going to be a shepherd there or something. You're like, I wonder why they've got the no camping signs there.
Correlation between that story and
but yeah, you're totally right. I mean, Loch Lomond, Loch Earn, big problems, and in other parts of Scotland they don't. But
Why is that a no camping all around there? What's the reason for it?
It was a bylaw. It was an exception to the Land Reform Act. It was added in afterwards as well.
Yeah, it was added afterwards. I mean, I don't know in terms of Loch Lomond. I suspect it was added afterwards. Loch Earn, they fought quite hard to have it changed, I believe. I mean, there are things like sectarian violence is quite an issue there. So you can get the train, then you get the bus. It's not that far from Glasgow. There's a lot of drinking. And, so it's where these things start to fall down, because I've heard the Right to Roam campaign say things like, oh, well, if people were just able to access the countryside, they would learn to love it. And you're like, well, what about the guys in Loch Earn? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, why are they, kicking off and literally stabbing each other?
Yeah.
There've been some very violent incidents. And then you go to Harris, right, way up, one of the islands. And I was talking to farmers there, and they were saying, oh, they don't have too much of a problem with access. But it's not like because they opened the whole thing up, like everyone's just spread, equidistant across the country. And that's one of the arguments that. So my point really is like, let's not just say, oh, look how well it works in Scotland. Let's actually understand Scotland and then say, what could we do better given the differences?
I used to work on a project with Natural Resources Wales years ago, and one of the women working on it, she was coming up to the end to her retirement at that time with Natural Resources Wales, but before they formed that quango, and it was still part of the Countryside Council for Wales, so a bit like sort of Natural England, sort of DEFRA. They were responsible for mapping out the right to roam areas under the Countryside Right of Way Act, and the whole idea was that they would look at someone like Merthyr Tydfil and say, well, these hills around them, they can't access these people, so we're going to make all of the hill area around here open access land, then they can access it. She was talking to me about how idealistic she was in the late 90s, that this was going to happen and this was such a fantastic opportunity. And now in about 2012, 2013, with the rise of social media, she massively regrets how much they did because of the effect it had on the landscape.
Yeah. And what effect did it have?
You ended up with the quarry areas that were previously inaccessible now just became somewhere that was almost impossible to police, because you ended up with antisocial behaviour, as the papers would call it, but just fires, people getting drunk, smashing stuff, all the sort of antisocial human behaviour, but it was spreading out then into the natural areas and areas that had been effectively de facto nature reserves because they were crap for grazing and people didn't go there. They had become areas then just where people go to for mountain biking now. And then that leisure push just gets further and further out. And the thing that led to that conversation from memory was there's something that became famous on Facebook at the time called the Snowdonia Infinity Pool, which is actually just some poor sod's water supply halfway up the mountain, but it had sort of this dam thing that meant it looks like an infinity pool. So people started going doing wild swimming there, because it got them a great photo overlooking the Nant Peris Valley. But they then just ended up with one person, one after another, and they ended up with literally a queue of people waiting to get their photo taken in some poor sod's water supply. And it's the social media element of it I think that was a missing element for the people who drew up these policies in the first place. And I think if you were doing the Land Reform Act or the Countryside Right of Way Act now, it would be less permissive, is my sincere belief. I don't think as much land would get added onto.
I think we get less access to and including camping as well.
I don't think you wouldn't get wild camping. You might get wild camping maybe in some areas, but I don't think a lot of the access land that was included would be included. I
That's
think
really interesting.
A smaller number.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I keep sort of thinking, and actually, this is something that a guy said to me, a gamekeeper on Dartmoor. He said that he was really terrified when the protest happened there, and he thought his pheasant pens were going to get smashed up. And then he went up at the end of the day on his mule, and he said there wasn't a bad person among them, and that was really interesting. But he said, but it's not. I mean, I sort of disagree with that because there were quite a lot of people there with signs protesting against pheasant shooting and so on, which is the only reason this guy was there. And I spoke to people who were really sort of poorly informed. But at the same time, you get these kind of tremendously idealistic land access campaigners who think that everybody else in this country is like a sort of really nice Guardian reading, knitting, vegetable growing, whatever. And you're like, no, that is, you are not representative of the entirety of the country, I'm afraid. And most people just want to walk their dog. Most people just want to go mountain biking. Lots of people just want to have cans of beer and make a fire.
So is it like the free speech argument that if you argue for free speech, you must be willing to defend the things you do not want to hear? That if you argue for freedom of access, you must be willing to defend the things you don't want to happen in that place?
Well, exactly. I mean, that's a really good argument. And you're saying all kinds of things that I'm thinking, shit, why did I not include this in my book?
Second edition, mate. Second edition.
Oh, well, exactly. Well, yeah, paperback. Yeah, I mean, it's selling well. Hopefully there'll be another hardback edition. But no. I mean, that is totally true. Yeah. And then you get these things. Oh, well, as I say, if you could just see these things, you would learn to love them. I mean, that doesn't carry. And also, okay, so if normal people could just see wildlife, they would learn to love it. But what about the landowners who get to see these things all the time but don't? And you're like, are they different sorts of people? Because that doesn't really make sense to me. So it's just these illogical arguments, really, and this idealism.
So Steelman, the argument for right to roam, then, what would be the best argument for increasing access? What would be the best benefit to the nation to increase that access?
Again, I would come back to, I don't think it's about access. I think it's about opportunities for engagement. And I think those are two different things. And I think as long as we kind of pursue, I mean, I tell you who would really benefit, right? I tell you who would really benefit from more access would be people who want to let their dogs off the lead for a good run. They would absolutely love it.
Lurcher owners.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's true. They would love it. The coursing boys would love it. But but the thing is, yeah, it'd be great for people who want. I mean, I said on the radio the other day, I said, they quoted me rather. They said, and we're going to speak to a guy who believes that dogs should never be off the lead on the beach in spring. And everyone's like, what an idiot, right? And you're like, no, like that. That is where we're going wrong. Okay, that is the problem. Like, people just don't understand that their dogs are predators, that they are seen as predators, not in a kind of devious way, but you know what I mean. And that's just, it's just crazy. It's just crazy. It's just, yeah, humans are just so arrogant, and we kind of can't see it.
I've got a Chihuahua, so I can tell you he's not much of a predator.
No.
He's never chased a bird off its nest, let me tell you.
He'll do some serious damage to a chicken nugget.
Oh, I don't even. He's not got that many teeth.
24 hours with a chicken nugget, and he would have mostly destroyed it.
Yeah, he would have taken the batter off at the very least. I also have never did not know. Actually, saying this right, so I've had a variety of dogs, and it does depend on your dog breed. But now I have a cocker, which is a mental thing, bred to put birds into the air. That's what she does.
Yeah.
So to now I see the severity of it. I mean, I'd only have to let her off for 2 seconds, and like the whole would be in the trees or gone. So I do think that does make a difference in the breed of dog.
Oh, breeding, 100%, yeah.
what would most people do if they got their way? What would most people do with their access? They would potentially go to places that are dense with wildlife and disturb it. So I was reading the book and I was listening to all the points about the counter argument, but then just the why you want access, other than just that the right has been taken away from me and I don't like it. It's like loss aversion. When something gets like, it's much more painful when you lose some money than it is when you gain some money. You pay far more attention to it. And it's just the fact that the right of not being able to go to a place seems to wind a lot of people up, which...
But access has got better, which is really important. So this whole notion of loss is really interesting. Like, I spoke to a guy who'd known Benny Rothman well, who helped organize, I think was it like the 50 years later march or something? And he was like, oh yeah, access is so much better now than it used to be. But that's not the narrative that a lot of people are spinning now. So I hear your point completely. And I think the places people want to go to is really interesting, because you're right? Like, no one wants to walk through a field of wheat. No one wants to walk through a boring dead landscape. They want to walk where the deer are. They want to walk in the woods. They want to walk in the meadows. But those are the places that the wildlife are. So like,
they want to get amongst wildlife and disturb it, but then that's fundamentally not good for wildlife, because they, badgers don't like it if you come and go, look, let's get a selfie with this one. This one's frightfully cute.
To pick up on Callum's point there, then, is it that basically there's nobody... Well, actually, no, that's not true. The Ordnance Survey do this. There's no organisation saying, look, there's loads of access in the UK and you can go to all these places. There's no... That narrative sort of stopped about 2011. 2012, and the only narrative is that there's access is unequal, or access is virtually there's nothing, and if you don't vote in support of right to roam, you'll lose it all. That's one argument, and then the other argument is no, we don't want you on our land, and that's the A and the B.
That's it. Yeah, and you meet all these like sensible, quiet guys in the middle who are like, yeah, I'd quite like to have better paths down the side of the road, and they're like, no one really listens to me, and you're like, that's a fairly decent argument. Like, no one cares about the better bus services in rural places, better paths on the side of the road.
I'd like to be able to ride a bike here.
Yeah. Do you the Strava app? So if you're into your running or your cycling or something, that you can log your runs and record it. If you go for the paid version, there's a heat map function. I am going somewhere with this, but that shows you anonymized data of where Strava users go.
Right.
So where they record, and that, if you overlay that on top of footpath maps for the UK, you can see that most people don't go. They stay on certain paths, but they don't go on most of them. Most of the footpath network isn't used, or is used very, very lightly. I know it's only one app, but if you take that, even if it's 5% of the users, if you spread it across, that's an average of behavior that we don't use the network that we have. We don't use the access land that we have. So maybe before we open up the rest of it, should we you're
finish
right. your supper first before you have your dessert.
Yeah,
it's weird, isn't it? But again, it's like, is it really about access? And I don't know. And it's about all kinds of things. But it's hey, it was a lot of fun, and the fallout has been spicy.
So where your book's out now? When did it come out? Was it
came out on the 24th of April?
So that's last week. It's already in its first week now.
It's only 1 week in. If this keeps up, I'm going to be, yeah.
And what's it called again?
What's it called again?
Well, go on, Callum. Your point's going to be better. Go on.
There was one piece that I've got highlighted, which was the
just one.
Do you know what's really weird? Because I did a PDF version and ChatGPT'd it. Put the whole thing in and ask a bunch of questions based on it. And I had an hour drive to my last photo shoot that I had a conversation with ChatGPT all about what the contents of the book involved. And then today I've listened to you for like 6 hours in total in audio format. So now I'm hearing it live in concert as well. So that's
Jesus. I'll have to take out some kind of restraining order or something at this point.
I've had a full overdose of the Galbraith.
Yeah.
But there was one particular part that I'd highlighted that was the parrying of the people that would stop you, like preparing for the stuff. You role played the
Oh yeah, that was so funny.
the parrying of the apple technique.
Oh, the
And
apple technique. Yeah. Oh yeah, the apple technique. But any piece of fruit will do.
Yeah. A banana. I feel like a banana might be a little bit sexual.
Bunch of grapes. Bunch of grapes would absolutely. Sharon fruit, a little bit of persimmon, a few lychees in there. No,
You're
so
listening to Britain's premier rural podcast.
We like to keep the tone up.
Right, so this was absolutely hilarious, and so I went to this How to Trespass workshop, and the whole thing was kind of funny, but there was this moment where we were talking about what to do when you get caught, right? Getting down to the nitty gritty. Okay, so you're having fun, frolicking in the meadow, and the landowner comes up, and this guy, John Moses, said that it's really good to have an apple on you because you just get the apple out and you start eating it, and it just has this sort of conveys this sense of being at ease, and it kind of puts them slightly off guard or whatever. And I was just thinking, this is crazy talk. And there's a Monty Python thing about how to defend yourself with a piece of fruit, or rather from a piece of fruit, right? What are you going to do if you're walking home tonight and someone attacks you with a bunch of loganberries? And I was thinking this. I was like, is this actually? And I was looking around the room and people taking notes, people nodding along, and I was like, this is really crazy. And I wrote this up, and people were reading it, people were laughing, people were in hysterics, and they're like, is this was for real, right? I'm like, yeah, 100%. So
I've got a confession.
Man. You've done it. You've done it.
Some of these techniques are absolutely things that I've done when I've been caught fishing places that I shouldn't. I shouldn't have been caught fishing.
And the apple technique?
I've never used the apple technique, but I might possibly do that. The ignorance technique.
Oh, yeah, ignorance technique's a great one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's plenty of techniques, and I was thinking about the whole access thing, and I thought I've never actually felt like there's anywhere I couldn't go, as in I've never thought I'd love to be on top of that hill and I'm not allowed to go there. I've never felt that.
Yeah.
But in fishing, there is little back streams of rivers that are, just because there's an industrial unit there that's not good for wildlife. It's not like a wildlife. It's not like a field margin on a thing. It's just like a part of a river. And I thought, that's where the fish are. I want to fish there. So I kind of.
How could we get that changed? How could we kind of open up fishing opportunities for more people in those sort of places?
Sack water bailiffs.
Yeah, round them all up against the wall.
Also, people poaching and stealing fish. That's one of the reasons they don't want to police it. They don't want people. It's probably a bit like the camping argument. They don't want people sitting out camping on a weir pool, drinking beer, lighting fires, putting irresponsible fishermen are terrible, leaving line on the floor, rubbish, litter. You can't keep the scroats away, but it doesn't stop me wanting to catch the fish in a responsible.
I think we've all fished in places that we shouldn't have been fishing, and in some ways, on common ground, that's partly where it came from, was being a little boy wanting to go and fish, wanting to go with my terrier to try and catch rabbits in places. But as you say, yeah, I mean, I kind of agree. It's interesting. I just found lots and lots of people who felt they could walk anywhere, particularly the people from abroad. That was really interesting. People who were saying that Britain is a place where you can really roam.
Yeah, it's that comparative analysis that you think about where you're coming from. You mentioned right at the beginning of the book, you were talking to an American journalist.
Yes.
And she was talking about land access in the States. It made me, when I read that, it made me think about, Steve Rinella, the meat eater guy.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, so his brother, Matt Rinella, has a completely counter campaign running, which is trying to stop hunting social media from publicizing things and getting too many people into hunting. Yeah, so he's got this Hunt Quietly movement, which is trying to maintain the public access by trying to reduce poor behavior.
That's amazing.
And it's really interesting to listen to. I like listening to his stuff, and I've been on his podcast talking about the UK sort of situation, because the access to land there is weirdly, it's sort of the publicly held land is almost communist in the American sense, and the public lands, and this is held in trust for the nation for everyone to use.
Yeah.
Is a very non-American idea, it feels like.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah.
And this, when he was amazed that you could have effectively foot highways running, zigzagging back and forth
the Americans
across your
are
deer
amazed by
stalking
that.
ground.
Yeah, like Nathaniel Hawthorne writes about that like these, and you can't build over them, you can't divert them, and yeah, it's really so curious. It's so curious, these comparisons. But at the same time, I mean, look, so access might be very good, but I do think, and it's a point I come to at the end, I wish there were more opportunities to engage. I mean, why aren't there more people out deer stalking? Why aren't there more people, feeding and maintaining flight ponds? And, there are just all sorts of things we could and should be doing. And I think it's easy to point to them. It's much harder to work out how we create those connections, but that's where our focus should be. And I worry that if we, bash each other over the head with, is access good or isn't it good, as a kind of big stick, then we kind of lose sight of really what we should be talking about.
So what would you like people to do after listening to this podcast in relation to this? Where would you like them to go?
You got to buy the book, right? And I'm not just talking like one copy. I'm talking like 2, 3, 4, 5 copies.
Get it up in the charts. Get it right up.
Exactly. I want it bang. I want it like Brat Summer. I mean, there are enough people out there trying to...
Six people in our audience know what that means.
Yeah, exactly. People are like, what the hell is that? No, yeah. I mean, honestly, like, read it. Enjoy it. I think it's a fun read. I mean, I hope you raised a smile. I mean, that was something the Observer pointed out. They said, very funny at points. It's in some ways a bit of a love letter to English eccentricity. But I think what I want people to do is I want them to read, and I want them to think. It's not a polemic, it's an inquiry, and it puts lots of different points of view across. And sure, I have a point of view, but it's there quite quietly. I want people to come away thinking that they've been introduced to people and places, and complex arguments that they weren't aware of before.
Callum, you look like you're going to say something.
I was just going to ask, where can people find you on the social medias? Or have you
on the
hidden
social
yourself?
medias? Oh, I'm not off social media, but I don't use it as much as I used to. People might find it disappointing. Yeah, you follow me on Instagram. I occasionally look at Twitter, and then I think, oh my God, why did I do that? Or X, or whatever you call it now. Yeah, I'm kind of like, I don't know. I'm increasingly getting to a place where I like to write things. I like people to read them. I like to engage with people that way, or rather, actually not engage with them that way, rather than on social media having a back and forth.
If people are subscribing to you on social media, they might be expecting all these epic shots of all your adventures outdoors, but it does just seem to be a lot of drinking coffee and sort of nice shots of the corner of a window and this very nice cafe down the road. It's like you do seem to have a life like it's out of a Ben Elton film.
I don't even know who Ben Elton is, but yeah, no, I'm quite nomadic. I'm kind of in London a lot. I love being in London, but I also like getting away from London, and I spend a lot of time in Norfolk. So I kind of, sometimes you get the occasionally I like rush back from Norfolk having been stalking, and like I get my timing slightly wrong, and I end up at like a book launch in South Ken, in kind of covered in muntjac piss or whatever, and you kind of you're just going between the two.
Launch that as your own fragrance.
Exactly, yeah.
Paddy
It's quite a
Galbraith's
mild
muntjac
fragrance.
piss. Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit of muntjac green, a little. There's a sweetness to muntjac, but yeah, it's been I've been shooting a lot of muntjac because I'm getting married soon, and I decided I'd put muntjac on the menu, so I've just been slaying muntjac.
Well, I think there's no better place to end a podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, I think, the other thing is, I just want to say a final thing is, like, if you're listening to this podcast and, you want to go out and you want to shoot muntjac, you want to shoot rabbits, you want to do whatever, and, try, really, like, connect with people and knock on doors and so on. I had a really good chat. That guy who does Tommy's Outdoors, that podcast? Yeah, he was saying to me, he's a Polish guy who lives in Ireland, and he was saying that he just like spent a lot of time knocking on doors asking if he could come and shoot people's deer. And he said he's got like so much deer stalking now. He's also met so many people, and Yeah, I think people are a lot more welcoming than we often realize. So yeah, do what you want to. Life is short, right? Have fun and engage with nature as much as you possibly can, and ask for more. We should definitely all be asking for more, and asking for more for other people as well.
So, Patrick Galbraith, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No